Hello, good people. Uh, a very good afternoon, good evening. On my side is 17:26 Botswana time. So I don't know what time it is where you are. So good morning, good evening, good night. We're meeting again for the Black Blockchain Summit 2021. And I'm so honored today to have with me Charlene and Maureen, who will be joining me on a discussion to talk Bitcoin evolution, Bitcoin and blockchain evolution. So we're gonna take that journey together for about 40 minutes, and we'll call it a day. I hope we're gonna have a very fruitful discussion, a beautiful discussion, and it's so beautiful that the three of us are all ladies. So it is Ladies' Day today. Thank you so much. I'll start off the session by having the two beautiful ladies introduce themselves and what they do so that people can get to know them a little bit better. Yeah. Uh, I'm giving the button to you guys to take up the talk.
I can start.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Charlene Federico. I actually wear a whole lot of different hats. I'm the founder of a fintech company called Guidify. We match women of color with financial advisors, financial coaches, and wealth education. We also teach cryptocurrency classes. I'm a moderator of the Black Bitcoin Billionaires Club, which is the biggest club on Clubhouse dedicated to encouraging the Black community to get smart about Bitcoin. And I also run a Twitter Spaces discussion series called Bitcoin in Nigeria. And that's a discussion series that we have monthly, and we engage the influencers, founders, developers, and ecosystem builders that are leading the Bitcoin revolution in Nigeria. So I wear a lot of Bitcoin hats, and I'm super excited to be here today with the Black Blockchain Summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you. Maureen?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Maureen Murad, and like Charlene, I am also a multi-hyphenate, as we call it. I am an attorney. I have a business called Crowdy Advisors, which helps startups raise money via equity crowdfunding and debt crowdfunding. And it also has the opportunity to not only build community, but also, maybe attach a token or some sort of perk to the crowdfunding campaign. I'm also a professor at the University of New Hampshire School of Law, and I teach blockchain in the law, tokenomics and crypto regulations, and smart cities. I am also a member of the CFPA, the Crowdfunding Professional Association, and I'm on the education committee and the legal and regulatory affairs committees.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. It's so amazing that today we are joined by people who have like different skills, I'll say, different expertise. And I do believe those skills we're going to be able to use them in our discussion or in our talk. It's more like it's more like a chat. So we're just going to be having like a chat. Mm-hmm. So today we are talking Bitcoin and blockchain evolution. Maybe we look from the very beginning, from 1991, with the start of a technology or a technology that was proposed by Stuart Hubbard, who proposed the chain of blocks. And then we have Nick Szabo on BitGold. And in 2008, 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto talking about peer-to-peer currency, cash that can be used by people by sending money from one person to the other. And here we are today. We're seeing a lot of developments that are happening today in the crypto space. Can you maybe take us on a brief of what you understand about Bitcoin and blockchain, and what do you see or you think is going to be happening in the next coming future?
You can go ahead, Charlie.
I'll start. So I'm a banker by trade, and I'm looking. So when I think about Bitcoin and blockchain, I'm looking at the banking industry. This year, 2021, has been a breakout year for Bitcoin. You're beginning to see attention from institutional investors, so large banks, the large global multinational banks that have once shunned Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are moving into investing. They're offering Bitcoin and cryptocurrency to their largest and wealthiest investors. And I think we'll continue to see the world kind of shift in that space. The other thing that's really interesting about this year, 2021, is we begin to see more countries start to clarify regulation around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. It's the first time we've seen the SEC, the CFTC in the United States actually start to issue their positions. Around the world, you saw China decided to ban cryptocurrency mining. The Central Bank of Nigeria had a number of different positions on cryptocurrency, the latest of which they banned cryptocurrency use for banking institutions. So you saw, I just think that this year was just pivotal because you saw the crypto regulation come into focus. You see institutional investors around the world beginning to invest. And I think this will continue. Cryptocurrency this year has been recognized. It's always been a financial asset class, but the world is beginning to recognize it as a financial class. And I think in particular on the world stage, you're beginning to see and hear stories about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin changing lives, creating pathways for financial future for families, creating pathways for financial future for whole communities. And of course, it's really hard to talk about Bitcoin this month without recognizing that just a few days ago, El Salvador recognized Bitcoin as legal tender. That is huge. El Salvador is a country that had been plagued by economic challenges, and they have decided to be, blockchain forward but Bitcoin forward in terms of using Bitcoin as a tool to drive economic independence as a country. And I think we'll continue to see Bitcoin on the world stage as a tool for economic independence and financial independence for families, for individuals, and for communities, and for whole countries.
I agree with all of that. And I also want to point out that, from the very beginning, mass adoption has always been a thing that, that the community wanted to achieve. And for better or worse, having these institutional investors be part of it, I think will help with mass adoption because, PayPal or Venmo or Circle or, Goldman Sachs, these different companies that have their reputations will, that are not necessarily good. But I think by bringing Bitcoin and blockchain into the focus for people who might not have known about it otherwise is a way that we get to mass adoption. And I guess when you think about like what the journey was, I think the journey didn't necessarily start around, the technology, right? It started around, what seemed interesting or sexy, if you will, like the crypto aspect of it. But I think as time has gone by, the conversations have kind of matured so that we could see that, yes, and on the financial services side, the technology is great and there's this potential for generational wealth to be built. But I also think that, being open to also seeing all of the other industries that can be better by incorporating the technology is something else that's also kind of exciting, I think.
So talking about mass adoption and acceptance, do you think at the moment with the banks and all these is it EFTs and all that happening, is it because people are actually adopting Bitcoin, or this big institution are looking for a way to control the market? Because it has always been about control. What do you think? I'm not trying to put you in a corner or anything, but having this discussion. So that, what do you think this is about? Is this about adoption or acceptance or what?
I can tell you what, I think it's about returns. I mean, I think it's just about returns. I mean, it is the highest performing asset class we've ever seen in the history of investments, period. Like, I think it's a numbers game for Wall Street. I don't think that the global banks wanted to invest. I think the client interest and attention to Bitcoin pushed many of these investment banks to take a second and third and fourth look at it. I think they didn't have a choice. I think it's about money.
Maureen, what do you think?
I agree, but I also think I think when you think about money, it kind of aligns itself with control, right?
Yeah.
But I agree. I think that the big wigs, they didn't want to get in on it initially. They talked lots of trash about it. We saw lots of, CEOs, like Jamie Dimon of JP Chase, and all these other different high profile people, if you will, saying all these different things about Bitcoin and cryptos. And then, shortly thereafter, clearly changing their positions, right? And buying into it. And, essentially even pumping the market in some instances. But so yes, I think a lot of it does have to do with the numbers and the fact that people had to pay attention because their clients, their, where they were going to get their returns from and their fees, et cetera, were also very interested. I also feel like on the side of the, the average person, that the average person is who really was pushing the conversation. And I think that shows a testament to the community, right? Granted, there are some people on, I think there's a continuum and there are extremes, but I think for the most part, people agree that this is something revolutionary. And as Charlene said, in terms of the returns on this type of asset class, the fact that now there are so many different research projects and different companies trying to find a way to get in is a testament to, how revolutionary this all is.
Yeah. So do we agree? Do we all agree, or do we believe that Bitcoin and blockchain are there to, disrupt the financial market and to disrupt the way we do our day-to-day transactions with the institutional banks and all that? Do we see that happening?
Absolutely.
Definitely, yeah.
I think it's a better system of money. I think here in the United States, sometimes it's harder to see some of the challenges, or it's harder for the US, folks in the US to see the challenges with the monetary system that we have. But if you zoom out and you look around the world, then you see some of the problems. You see hyperinflation, you see unemployment, you see what happens when there are governments that make decisions that don't necessarily support the economic viability of communities for an entire country. And so I think that Bitcoin as a use case, I think the strongest, and I've said this, and I truly believe this, I think that the most elegant use case for Bitcoin is in Nigeria, full stop. Right? You see where a stronger, more efficient system of money can flourish and can allow people to build generational wealth. In the United States, it is absolutely a great use case as well, but we don't have some of the challenges we don't have some of the order of magnitude of challenges with our financial system. So yeah, I think that innovation, Bitcoin is an innovation to a system that was working for some, but not working for all. And if capitalism doesn't work for all, is it really working? I don't think so.
Okay. I think the other thing to really take into account is that in the US, we also have this legacy system around money, right? That other countries don't have. And so they are able to kind of prop up a system or be part of the system a little more easily. But on the other side of that, we do hear about people saying underbanked and unbanked and, and trying to go to places like Haiti, where my family's from. And I think that if we're going to talk about that, we also have to talk about the infrastructure that is lacking in a lot of these places. So yeah, all you need is a mobile device. It doesn't have to be a fancy cell phone, and you need Wi-Fi. And you could say that here. Okay, you need that. But do you have electricity? Do you have electricity regularly? Do you have an ability to not only just have electricity, but the Wi-Fi connection? A lot of these places, especially in the Caribbean, have I don't know what it is with Mother Nature, but like these natural disasters just keep coming. Like, they're not even able to bounce back for some of those things. And then, then we're trying to introduce something new. So I feel like introducing something new is great, because I think it also helps people not only build generational wealth and all of that, but this just gives people access, like people who are on the street selling sugarcane and things like that. And, this could also give them ability to kind of expand their businesses and things like that, and they wouldn't have that opportunity if not for this type of technology. So I do agree that it is disrupting. It's already disrupting. And if it wasn't disrupting, then we wouldn't have all these regulators in on it. We wouldn't have all these, high profile, high net worth people talking about it, and things like that. I don't think we'd have the interest if it were not disrupting. So I guess the other thing is, not only is it disrupting financial services and how we transact and how we deal with people, but it's also it's also disrupting free flow of information, just data, period, ownership of certain types of assets, not just digital assets, but maybe what those digital assets represent, like NFT art or real estate, or or being part of a supply chain or logistics channel. So I think it started with financial services, but it's going to spread into other industries for sure, or it's going to continue, I should say, spreading into other industries.
And one more thing. Can I just add one more thing? I just think it's giving people hope. You know what I mean? And I think people need hope. Everyone needs hope around the world, depending on whatever financial situation you're starting from. It's giving people hope and a pathway to have ownership and agency over their own financial life. And that agency, like being able to lead it and control it at your will, that is powerful. And that is what every family, every mom, every dad, that's what they want to do. They want to be able to build their own financial life for their families. It's a very human desire. And that is what this technology is offering for the world. And it is revolutionary, because there are people in communities around the world that for reasons that have nothing to do with them are in situations where there's not a lot of hope.
Yeah. And I think it gives you a level of freedom that you don't have either, because you have this power, for sure. Yeah, I agree.
Talking about innovation and hope. Today, when we're looking at what is happening in the crypto space, not talking only about Bitcoin, but talking about the crypto space that is blockchain and all its applications that have been built on the blockchain. So don't we think that it becomes a little bit confusing for the newbie, for the person who is coming into crypto, to try and understand all these things that are happening, NFTs, metaverse, DeFi, all these. So how do we justify, or how do we say to a person who wants to follow this evolution that is happening in the Bitcoin, to say this thing can work, when each and every day we are trying to improve something by creating something, instead of improving something by actually building it and improving it, but we are coming up with all these. So how do we help a person who is new to understand this evolution that is happening?
I think there are a lot of ways.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, it is very innovative and it's complex technology, and but it's not impossible. I believe that one of the best way to understand Bitcoin is to understand someone's story. You need to understand what Bitcoin is to that person and how Bitcoin has changed an individual's life. And then you can put it in context for you and your story. One of the things that we do at the Black Bitcoin Billionaires, where we teach people, we have a number of different rooms for specific audiences. We have a room to focus on our senior community. We have a room to focus on parents trying to teach their kids about Bitcoin. We have a room to focus on specific newbies. I think that there's a cultural component to this. I think we want to, when you're talking to someone about Bitcoin, you really need to make it relevant to their understanding of the world and how they move in the space. And that's one of the reasons why the Black Bitcoin Billionaires Club exists. When I'm talking to women about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, I'm going to talk to them in a way that's relevant to the things that they're experiencing in their lives. And so I think that when you're sharing this information with your family and your friends, I think you have to make it relevant. You have to make it relevant to where they're starting from. And yeah, it's complex, but I think this is a topic that folks can't afford not to get. They can't afford not to get it. Like, we absolutely have to make sure that our communities are proficient and fluent in this information so that they can be ready for the next generation of finance. So.
And I think that is incumbent on the community to not necessarily stay in the echo chambers, right? Because we often talk to people who kind of already get it. There's like a language, there's a lingo to it. And I think being willing to have these different places, like Charlene was saying, that people can go in and, it serve as a safe space, because even though, we've been, in this community or being part of this movement for some time, things are still continuously changing. I'm always learning something new, right? I mean, and so now it's like, even though some people might feel like they're super new, I still feel new sometimes too, especially on the legal side of things, because it's like, oh, all of a sudden, people are like really paying attention and making all these different, I guess, providing all these different ideas or thoughts around like what should be regulated, et cetera. But the point is that even with these people who are coming in, I think by making sure that they do feel like they're okay with bringing, their questions or concerns, and you being able to explain it to the best of your ability, by also giving them resources too, because sometimes people, especially in the beginning, I found that people like described, how blockchain works differently. And in some instances I got it. And in other instances I was like, that doesn't really make sense to me. So I think, also encouraging people to seek out different resources that they can, hear, because you also don't want to be on a path where you only have this like very narrow focused view for something that's so big, right? That's so expansive. The last thing I'll say is that with the new folks, I also feel like a lot of times because the way that their interest got piqued is because of like a specific event. I think it's good to use that specific event that piqued their interest to see like what else they'd like to know. And I think having a story or some sort of narrative around something that they can relate to is helpful to understand like why this is something we should care about, why this is something so great.
Okay, cool. Still on that. Yeah. There's a lot that I'm saying, there's a lot that is happening in the space, right? Mm-hmm. So many projects that are coming up, many technologies that have been developed, and I still believe there's still going to be more that are going to be developed. So my question maybe is, in this evolution of Bitcoin and blockchain and whatever that is related to blockchain and Bitcoin, what makes a project accepted? Is it the technology, or it's actually about who is hyping it?
Who is hyping it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure I got the question.
Yeah. Like, let me say, for example, today, Doggy Coin, which is a meme coin, is highly given so much, I want to say, exposure, power, because Elon Musk was hyping it. Was talking about it, and now everybody is like, yeah, Doggy is the thing. That's what I'm asking. With this development, is it about the technology that we are following, or we are following the hype?
It's a little bit of both, right? Yeah. I think you use the hype to get people to talk about the technology, honestly. And I guess there's just, the thing is, the level of the hype can get out of control, right? But I do think one of the things I teach at the law school into economics is the idea of value. Oftentimes we confuse value with price, and we think if it costs this much, then it must be valuable. And we do this all the time with the things we buy, our clothes, blah, 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 right? But especially with Bitcoin and other cryptos, I think we have to be especially careful about how we assign value to something just because there's a price associated with it. And so with the projects, I try to be the person that's like in the middle that tries to be like realistic. Like, yeah, this is cool, but what can I do with it? Or yes, Elon Musk is talking about it, but like, does Elon Musk really care about money in my pocket? Like, what's his end goal? Like, why is he boosting this? And he goes back and forth, right? 1 minute he's all about Bitcoin. Next minute, what about the environmental effects? Next minute he's back. I'm like, so I guess this is the benefit of being around for a while. You see the flip-flopping, and I think obviously with the new folks, they might not see that, so they only come in at a point where they just see the hype part. But I think having some history and looking back is going to be helpful for you to determine what this hype is about and whether this is something you should be looking into.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think hype is a good on-ramp, but as long as we don't allow people to stay there, right?
Right.
If it brings them in and gets them interested, great. But the next step is, let's give you some fundamental tools to evaluate this cryptocurrency as an investment. One of the things, to your point, the difference between value and price is really important. We encourage folks to have a rubric, a list of 5 things that they're looking for when they're trying to evaluate their coins. They should be looking at the development community. They should be looking at the circulation, the supply. Like, these are tangible, actionable data points that if you can't tell me those things about this currency, this Dogecoin, whatever, then it doesn't deserve your time or investment, right? And especially, and I think that's why we encourage folks to use Bitcoin as the starting point. That is your true north. That's your North Star. You start there, you understand the properties of Bitcoin, you compare that cryptocurrency to Bitcoin. Usually, if they've actually spent the time to understand Bitcoin, there's not a conversation after that. If you understand the properties of Bitcoin, why Bitcoin has value, where that value comes from, and then you compare those other coins, the fact that many of them are centralized, the fact that many of them have exploding supplies, then you understand that, hey, you know what? Even if it's a penny, it's not worth a penny.
Right. Not even that. Yeah.
It's not even worth a penny, right?
Yeah.
It's not even worth a penny and not worth my attention. So it's like, creating this level of skepticism and it's really teaching, to your point, Maureen, technical analysis, tokenomics, and financial decision making around whether or not this is an investment that deserves your money.
Awesome. Moving from hype, let's talk legitimacy. So how do we, with this technology that we are building, the Bitcoin, the blockchain, and all that, how do we make maybe the legal institution, for example, which I believe there's been so much wars going on between Bitcoin and the legal institution, whether to regulate cryptocurrencies or not to regulate, how do we bring this institution to understanding the value? You speak about value, not in monetary terms, but in terms of what it can bring, the solution that it can bring, the change that it can bring. How do we bring the legal institution to understanding the value of Bitcoin and what it can bring, so that this wars that we see, can somewhere end? How do we bring legitimacy? I think that's the big question. How do we make Bitcoin legitimate? When you talk about regulations, I'm not only talking about the United States and SEC and all that. I'm talking about the whole global village, the whole world. How do you bring legitimacy to?
It's a hard question. So I understand the question. We all know Bitcoin is already legitimate, but how do you get these other countries around the world to believe in, and to acknowledge the legitimacy? I think it's the problem that we're all grappling with right now. But I actually think that the way you do it is you show impact. You show and tell the stories of how Bitcoin is changing lives. If you look at the fintech revolution that's happening in Africa, you have all of these wonderful blockchain and Bitcoin financial services organizations that are popping up and changing the lives by giving families access to financial services they didn't have before. You can't argue with those numbers. You can't argue with, people being able to achieve higher quality of life. You can't argue with that. And I think that's what you do. You see those results and tell the stories and make sure those stories are told over and over and over again, and point to the folks whose lives are better and what they've been able to achieve as a result of this innovative technology. And I think this is a problem, or not problem, a challenge that we will continue to work on. And I think the other part is there's a huge education component that needs to happen in the regulatory community. I think here in the United States, we do have some regulatory leadership that are very well-versed in blockchain. If you look at Gary Gensler is the head of the SEC, he used to teach blockchain technology at MIT, so that's great. But he represents a larger regulatory body where I'm sure there are varying levels of understanding of this technology. Arguably, same deal around the world. The regulatory bodies of these countries are still trying to understand it. So they're having to understand blockchain and regulate, and try to, manage the whole tax implications of it. It's a lot. And so I think those of us who are in positions of knowledge need to actively reach out and be a part of these discussions so that the regulatory bodies are well informed and they can do their jobs effectively.
Maury.
Yes, I agree. I'm sorry, I was trying to get myself off mute.
Yeah.
So I agree, especially with the fact that we already know that Bitcoin is legitimate. And I do think that we also have to be okay with the fact that not everybody's going to get it. Not everybody's going to want to get it. Not everybody's going to be interested. I think the benefit of this is that this gives people options. We know that as great as this is, at least for the time being and maybe for the next decade or so, this is not going to necessarily upend the financial system in such a way that it will only be about blockchain, only be about Bitcoin. If anyone thinks that, I think they're misguided because they don't realize the legacy issues that are grounded in money that was never, ever, ever intended to include any of us that have the skin color, right? And they will fight to the death to make sure that system remains. But I think what they're afraid of is the fact that we now have an option, right? We have a way to disrupt what they're doing, or a way to say, we don't want to deal with that we don't want to be part of that financial system. And so I'm going to, move and do something else. And I think that's where some of the issues with, the narratives around why it's not legitimate or why it's not this or that, to kind of create this storyline that, the traditional way is the best way or the only way. And even though at the same time, these same traditionalists are dipping their feet, right, or their toes on the Bitcoin side. So
yeah,
in a big way.
So I agree with Charlene, but I think we also have to be okay, because I've also seen like conversations on Twitter and different chat groups where people are like just barking at others because they don't necessarily accept this to be true, or they don't agree. And I think we have to be okay with people being open, and that people are going to come to this with their own perspectives and their own life experiences. So maybe you might think one person is only getting Bitcoin, investing in Bitcoin to be a hodler, right? To be someone who's going to use this as something that they could potentially, pass on to their children, et cetera. And then there are other people who are like, oh yeah, we want to be able to use Bitcoin for everyday transactions. Whichever side you're on, I think the point is that you have some freedom, you have the ability to have some power over your financial life that doesn't require you to go to the man, right? And so however you want to do it, that's really on that person. And I think we also have to be okay with the fact that not everybody's going to agree on how to do that.
Yep. Maybe my next question will be, do we foresee in the future Bitcoin the government, or we call them institutional or national digital currencies, are working together? Do we see the nations integrating Bitcoin with their digital currencies, or do we foresee a situation where they will make sure that Bitcoin dies and only the digital, there's national digital currencies are the one that stand at the end of the day?
Yeah, so there's always so much talk about the central bank digital currency.
Yeah.
You know, I have a different opinion. I actually think that those CBDCs will help adoption, right? So, you know, I think it gets people comfortable. There's a whole segment, particularly in the United States, that of folks that just they're skittish about technology, they're skittish about anything. So those folks need the government, they need a government sanctioned option for payment. Do I think it's going to kill Bitcoin? Nope. You can't kill Bitcoin.
Right.
But I do think that it introduces legitimacy for something beyond the normal digital payment system that we're used to, right? So we've been paying on digitally through Visa and, you know, MasterCard before, but essentially digital currency is a little different.
Sorry to chip in, we only have 5 minutes. I think maybe you present your points and then you also wrap up, give us your last word before I hand out to Maureen. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, you continue here.
Yeah. You know what? I think last points. I think that Bitcoin is the great equalizer and the great enabler. I think I'm looking forward to countries around the world really using this technology and system to drive financial independence for themselves and their communities. I'm excited about the future of blockchain and Bitcoin. And, I think it's so imperative for Black communities around the world to be fluent in this technology so that we can engage in commerce around the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Yeah. Thanks
so one
much.
comment on the CBDC before I close as well is that I agree that the CBDC, because we're now digitized. One, CBDC is not crypto, right? Not really. But I mean, I know I might get some rocks thrown at me, but that's the beauty of innovation, that as problems arise and technology is available, you find a way to solve problems, right? So with the CBDC, especially in places that are, considered third world, or like they have issues with the actual, physical money getting into people's hands, if the government is willing to find a way to digitize that obviously, they have their own motivations, but I think in the long run, it still benefits the people of that country, because now they have access to technology, they have the ability to, and I guess this is things we've all talked about already, they have the ability to have power over their financial lives, they have the freedom to move around. Granted, the infrastructure is an issue, but I think that, for the most part, people all around the world have some sort of device or some sort of access to, some mobile device that they might be able to use. And if not, then this is upon the government to find a way to make that happen. Because if you're going to create CBDCs and issue those, and it will have the same value as, the country's money, then you need to find a way and make sure that people can get access to that money. Because otherwise, what's the point of having the CBDC? So I think it does help with adoption, especially in places where they have no choice but to really rely on the government because of how things are in that country. So obviously not all countries are even interested in providing this access to their people, right? So the ones that are, I think, are going to lead the way. And that also helps people realize, okay, well, if this can't be available here, but I know that it's available elsewhere, I think that creates interest. And again, that's back to thinking about how can I be part of this, even if I can't have it right here in my backyard. So as closing, I want to echo Charlene that it was a pleasure chatting with you both today. I am excited about the future. I think the past is an indication of like how the future is going to be. We had some rocky moments, right? We had some, moments where we were, questioning our life's decisions, etc. But I think that also comes with the excitement of something new and innovative that will not only help us being like, the people on the call right now, but also something that you can pass on to generations. And I think that is what really is the benefit. And I know that, there's a generation of us, like the millennials, we've seen a lot in our time period, right? So, we've gone from house phones to CD players to all types of stuff. So I feel like being able to continue to innovate and pass that on to later generations will just be, an awesome thing. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, ladies. It's been a very beautiful discussion. And now I believe that Satoshi is a lady. Because I had wonderful ladies in the discussion.
Right.
Thank you so much. I hope we meet again, maybe possibly in the physical in 2022 when this coronavirus thing is gone. Thank you so much, guys. It's been an honor.
Absolutely.